Mr. Minister, what is the Hungarian assessment of one-year conflict between Russia and Ukraine?
Hungary is a country which is super interested in peace, and we are not afraid of speaking about that. And we urge the international community to avoid any kind of steps or measures which would further prolong this war, because prolongation means more suffering.
As a member of NATO and EU, of course, and as a friend of Vladimir Putin, could your Prime Minister, Mr. Orban, Viktor Orban, play a role of mediator between Russia and Ukraine and succeed where French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz failed?
I don't think mediation is what is needed. What I think what is needed is that the international community avoid those measures which increase the volume of this war rhetoric. And instead of using war rhetoric, peace rhetoric should be applied. And it should not only be us in the European political arena to speak about peace, but the others should come to this direction as well.
As we can see, Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky are warriors to the end. What could possibly shift their tough positions, and I would even say stubbornness?
Well, from the very beginning of the conflict, our approach was very clear. There must be Russian-American talks to take place. There must be a Russian-American agreement being made about the new security structure. And of course, there should be a commitment from both the Russian and the American side towards peace. And unfortunately, this is now an illusion, a naive idea, because too many decisions are being made from all sides, which decisions unfortunately bring the risk of prolongation and escalation.
Would you say the latest offensive launched by Russia might prevail, all the more so as the Ukrainians look ill-prepared to counterattack amidst confusion and maybe bones of contention inside the Western camp?
Because only an immediate ceasefire and kickoff of peace talks can end up in peace. Without either of the two, either a ceasefire or the peace talks, there will be never. Peace will be never coming. So instead of delivering weapons, instead of using war rhetoric, we should concentrate on how to make peace. Because we represent this position maybe because we are too close. We are in the neighborhood. There's zero distance between Hungary and Ukraine, zero, because we have a border. Those who are located like hundreds or thousands of kilometers away, or even an ocean away, they might look at the situation in a different manner because the impacts are not severe and not immediate on them. But we, once again, underlining, living in the neighborhood, we see the very, very negative impacts of this whole war.
According to you, Mr. Minister, is there a risk of direct confrontation between the US, NATO and Russia, which would inevitably lead to a third world conflict?
Well, that would be the worst-case scenario, and this is something that should be avoided. That's why I'm usually satisfied after the foreign ministerial meetings of NATO, where the Secretary General and colleague foreign ministers make it clear that there's one thing that we definitely do agree, all of us, that a direct conflict between the Russian Federation and NATO must be avoided, must be prevented. I hope that this is going to be the case, and I hope that there will be no direct confrontation between NATO and Russia. I hope that all member states, all allies within NATO will respect this common position of ours, that we have to make all our efforts in order to avoid any direct conflict between NATO and Russia. And I hope that all allies and all member states will refrain from any step, decision, measure, statement, which would lead to a direct confrontation.
Don't you think that, knowing Vladimir Putin, he will never negotiate and will never satisfy himself with annexation of the whole Donbass?
The Western world is not concentrating on peace talks to be launched. then in the upcoming days, weeks and months, there will be more and more suffering, more and more people will die, more and more people will have to escape, more and more families will be torn apart, and this is something that we do not want to see. So I understand it's very exciting to think about who thinks what and who has what kind of plans, but I think it would be much better to end this conflict.
According to you, Mr. Minister, can Vladimir Putin succeed in his aim at rebuilding the lost Soviet empire?
Well, you know, I don't know whether he has such kind of plans or not. What I know is that those countries which used to be part of Soviet Union are now independent and sovereign countries, and this must be respected by everyone.
If Vladimir Putin does not achieve his goals after having lost his bet on a blitzkrieg war, can he use the nuclear arm?
Well, I hope it will never take place, and I hope that neither myself nor my kids nor my grandchildren will have to face such kind of terrible and tragic development. If nuclear weapons are being used, then it means the world is over, basically, because there are so many nuclear weapons around in the world by, owned by some countries, that if they start to apply them, where's going to be the end? I think the end's going to be at the end, sorry to say. I mean, the world's going to come to an end. So it has to be avoided by any means. That's why I say that all additional days we spend with war in Ukraine, the bigger threat or the bigger danger is out there, that situation is going to be out of control. And if situation gets out of control, no one of us, regardless of what position we fulfill, what strong or weak countries we represent, will never be in a position to stop this madness. So the war should be stopped, because if we do not stop the war, then these dangers, these threats, these risks, by definition, will be out there.
Iran, with its terrorist regime siding with Russia against Ukraine, is not it a big problem for Europe?
Every development which create uncertainty in the Middle East are dangerous for Europe, because the security situation in the Middle East is in a direct connection with the security situation in Europe. So for us, security and stability of the Middle East is vital. Therefore, an Iran which is part of the respectful cooperation of the international community would be important. If Iran is not part of this respectful cooperation of let's say, global politics, then it's a problem, for sure, because it is a destabilizing factor in that region, stability of which is extremely important from the perspective of our stability and our security.
I would like to make an addendum question.
Please.
As I said, Iran is a terrorist regime. What is the interest for Putin to use Iran in this war against Ukraine? I don't think it is a natural alliance. I think it's an alliance of circumstances.
If it is an alliance, we don't know. We don't know. So, of course, once again, all questions related to war, by definition, have an outcome, have an answer which is negative, which is dangerous, which is risky. This war should be stopped, and peace should come. And if peace comes, then all these questions can be taken off the agenda, and all these complicated questions become irrelevant.
How do you view your relationship with Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu, who, as you know, has good relationship with Putin?
Well, I have to tell you that in Hungary, we were crossing fingers for Prime Minister Netanyahu to return. We base our foreign policy strategy on mutual respect, so we never interfere into domestic issues of other countries. But if we raise the question to ourselves, under whose leadership were the relations between Israel and Hungary flourishing and improving and advancing, then it's obvious that under the leadership of Prime Minister Netanyahu, we had the best possible relationship with Israel. So from this perspective, we were really crossing fingers for him to win. Now, as he did, we are very happy, we congratulated him, and we are ready to further enhance this bilateral relationship. You know, we do not like that very unfair approach which is being, let's say, reflected in international organizations against Israel. We never vote in favor of those biased resolutions which are very much anti-Israel in international organizations, and we build partnership and bilateral cooperation in the field of economy, trade, culture, science in a very beneficial manner for both sides. So we are excited about the new term of Prime Minister Netanyahu. We are excited whether he can pay another visit to Hungary, which is kind of being planned, and we hope to further deepen the cooperation.
Would you say that there are 4 persons who might be able, if Putin is open to the idea, to exert pressure upon the Russian president? Xi Jinping, Erdogan, Mr. Orban, and Putin.
Well, putting the pressure on someone who is president of the Russian Federation by any Hungarian politician, that is very hard to imagine, to be honest. Of course, it's but I mean, talking to him on a respectful basis, that's another story. That's why we are very happy when Chancellor Scholz or President Macron make attempts to talk to the Russian president and to try to at least keep the channels of communication open, which I think is vital under the current circumstances. But we have always had a pragmatic cooperation with the Russian Federation. They are very well aware of our position that this war is very bad for us. We condemn the war and we want the war to be stopped. But in the meantime, we keep the channels of communication open, because what I do believe is that if you stuck the channels of communication, then you basically give up even the hope for peace. And giving up the hope for peace is something that we definitely don't want to do. So communication, keeping in touch, talking to each other is important, even between those ones who are not happy to talk to each other.
How does Hungary react to a new world order which is being reshuffled by China and Russia?
When we entered office in 2010, we have launched a political strategy, the name of which has been Eastern Opening. Because at that time we already understood that in order to be successful in the center, you have to be open to cooperation with both sides. Of course, we are integrated politically speaking into the Western world, we are members of the European Union, we are allies in NATO, but we have to be open for economic cooperation with the Eastern world as well. And now it is being obvious that there are certain key sectors of global economy where East is taking the lead. And we have made a lot of efforts in order to become a kind of meeting point for the Western and Eastern major global companies to join their efforts there to take part in this reshuffled global order, let's put it this way. So, for example, the biggest German electric car making companies and the biggest Chinese and Korean electric battery manufacturers are there in Hungary. They join their efforts in order to enable the world to meet the green goals and to decrease the environmental pollution caused by transportation. So for us, a respectful cooperation with East and West is vital, because if we look back to our history, whenever there was conflict between East and West, we always lost. Central Europe always lost on the East to West conflicts, and we don't want to be losers anymore. That's why for us it is an interest of national security that we can cooperate to both sides.
Another addendum question. is, do you have the feeling today that there are two axes fighting each other? On the one hand, Europe, NATO, Israel, and on the other hand, Iran, China, Russia.
You know, we don't like seeing the world in blocks, because whenever the world was divided into blocks, that was bad to us. We lost 40 years of our lives and our history under communist regime during the Cold War, when the world was divided into two blocks. So we don't like the way of thinking about blocks, because if I look at, for example, the Chinese-European cooperation, on the political field, you know, it is being, complained about to what extent the Chinese are expanding their economic presence in Europe. But in the meantime, the big Western European companies base their strategies on a very tight cooperation with the Chinese economy. 700 billion euros of trade has taken place between China and the European Union in the recent years. So instead of decoupling, we have to cooperate in a respectful way, concentrating on mutual benefits. Of course, we must not be dependent on other parts of the world in major and important industries, but decoupling is not the solution. And we don't support any kind of decoupling. We support respect-based cooperation based on mutual benefits, because Hungary takes a benefit out of the presence both the Chinese and the German capital in Hungary.
But how do you plan to cope with Chinese Xi Jinping, who wants to be controlling the world in a certain way, and on the other hand with Putin,
look,
who is his ally?
Yeah, look, I've been dealing with Hungarian, Russian and Hungarian Chinese cooperation for almost 10 years in different positions, or even more than 10 years in different positions. And I can only tell you about my experience. I don't know about the experience of others, and I don't want to say that they are not right or whatever. I just want to speak about my own experience. So whenever I discussed with the Chinese about economic cooperation, about investments, about Chinese companies setting up factories in Hungary, creating jobs for the Hungarian people, bringing state-of-the-art technology, they have never attached any kind of political expectation. They have never asked us to represent this or that position. They never wanted to influence any internal developments in Hungary. This is my experience. Others might have different one, I don't know, but I can only tell you about my experience. The same with Russia, you know. We have, I think, a fair deal with the Russians on the energy cooperation. We buy gas from them, we buy oil from them, we build our nuclear power plant together. But they have never attached any political expectation or any political precondition to these contracts we signed. So again, it might be different for others, or in others might have different experience, but in my in my 10 or 12 years dealing with bilateral cooperation with these two countries, I do not remember one single case when they wanted us to represent this or that, or to think this or that, or to act like this or that.
Two questions. Can your Prime Minister, who is a strong man, Mr. Orban, talk straight with Putin into the eyes and tell him, please stop this war?
Well, whenever it's necessary, they can talk to each other. If I recall correctly, last time they spoke when Prime Minister took part on the funeral or the commemorative events honoring late Secretary General Gorbachev. So if there's a need, they can reach each other without any kind of problem. I'm in a special position because since 2010, since we have been in office, I took part on like 95% of their meetings. And I know that these meetings and these conversations were always straightforward, were always honest. Prime Minister is an honest person, so I mean he always represents his position. He always speaks in a straightforward manner. So I mean they can always talk to each other honestly. It's not a problem for us.
I think your country has always been right in its fight against immigration. Do you still consider that immigration is one of the reasons it's kind of the door open to terrorist acts, as we could have seen in Europe, not in Hungary, but France, Germany, Belgium?
Sure. Migration is one of the major security challenges which we Europeans are being faced with. Look at some Western European societies, look at the parallel societies, look at the extremist ideologies and the terrorist groups spreading around the western part of Europe, because it's simple. They take advantage of the possibility of crossing borders basically freely. Because what these migratory flows are about, that there's a massive wave which then crosses borders because the human rights activists and the liberal mainstream in Brussels and wherever push the countries, not to protect border, allow people to go through, which is insane. So we continue to carry out a very tough anti-migration policy. We stopped the illegal migrants. We stopped more than 260,000 last year at our southern border, 260,000. And the figures are growing. They are becoming more and more violent. The traffickers are using weapons. So this is basically an attack on our sovereignty as well, which we must not let happen in the future. So our policy is going to be very, very tough in the future as well against migration.
Mr. Minister, I want to thank you very much for having taken time to talk to us. And I want to thank you for your straightforwardness and appreciate.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.